It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, said Frederick Douglass. And there are several other messages along those same lines which make us realize that we have to nurture the children for better future of humanity and societies. But do we know the right steps in that direction? Do we then take the time to take those steps? Are some questions we all need to ask ourselves. Well, in case you've been thinking along those lines, you're absolutely at the right place because in our series, the guest on this episode is someone who has a research background with meditation intervention on the mental health risk of primary school aged children. He will speak to us about how, with the introduction of meditation to lives of young children, they can enjoy better mental health. Kabir Sattarshetty is a lecturer at the Charles Darwin University in Australia, and Kabir is joining us from Australia in his really early hours of the morning. Let's go ahead and welcome Kabir on the show. Hi, Kabir.
Hi, how are you?
Good. First of all, thanks for being a guest on the show and hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's a bit early. The kids are my wife's trying to occupy the kids, so hopefully they don't crash the interview. Yeah, it's good.
So, Kabir, from what I understand, you started meditating at a very young age in life. And let's begin by talking about your experience and your observations with meditation and how it has shaped you as an individual.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were meditators or are meditators. And so, I started doing it, as you said, from a very young age. But to be honest, when you do what your parents do, to begin with, often it's just conditioning. It's sort of the culture that you're brought up in. I did reach a point where probably, in my adolescent years, where I stopped meditating. Back then, it probably wasn't as socially acceptable as it is now. Now meditation's ubiquitous, everyone does it and no one bats an eyelid, but back then it was sort of weird. And as a self-conscious teenager, I sort of, stopped for a while. But I did realize very quickly that my equilibrium was just off, I found it more difficult to deal with, the day-to-day reality of life. So I gravitated back and that was good because then it became a true experiment, to see if this worked rather than if this was simply something that my parents did and then I followed them. And then after that, I haven't been able to do without. And just I think it's like anything, and it's like the founder Shamaji has always said, you have to take it as an experiment. And if you're honest, the main ingredient is if you're sincere and you're honest, and then you attempt it, you'll see the differences. That's what I found.
I'm so glad you brought up that point because that was actually going to be my next question for you. That did you feel yourself to be different from other non-meditator kids, or did they find you different in any way because you meditated? But yeah, it seems like you really charted your own course, and that's the way it should be, because sometimes we keep doing things because families do it, but if we can validate it for ourselves, that is really great. So, Kabir, now there are several studies you have concluded about using meditation as a preventative measure for better mental health in school-aged children. And when I was going through your thesis, I saw that you mentioned that the evidence concerning the decline of youth mental health over the past few decades has led many researchers to believe that youth of today is faced with unique, significant, and historically unprecedented challenges to their well-being. So if you could tell us more about your research interest, what propelled you in that direction, and what the findings were.
Sure. So it's two questions, yeah, so answer them in order. The first one, was I different? Yes. Partially because I studied abroad. I studied in India. So I am a product of two cultures. And I think that's helped me have perspective. So I can see the cultural differences and the impact of culture, right? And that's partly why I started to be interested in research. Why are things the way they are? And the second part of your question, yes, I think your introduction was perfect. There is an unprecedented mental health crisis, if you like, and that's widely agreed upon. And so we have this paradox where we have all the material comfort that we could possibly want, really, at least in the developed world, but we're just incredibly unhappy, and our children are very unhappy. 75% of all the mental health disorders will occur, under the age of 25, and they seem to be getting worse. The trends aren't improving despite us spending more and more money on mental health. So what's the problem? Now, there's a lot of solutions, and that there's been talk of resilience, and there's been talks of things like meditation, which I advocate, and I do believe there are benefits to it. But I have to also acknowledge that we have a cultural problem. So we can inoculate our children with good practices and build up their resilience, but we also have to start changing the culture. Otherwise, it ultimately won't get better. So yes, like you said, I was interested in what we could do to sort of give our children resilience, make them robust, when they're facing the challenges that they face in society. As you know, social media is a big issue with young people. I don't know what it's like in America, but I imagine it's quite similar. In Australia, for instance, routinely we have a yearly survey, and adolescents are saying things like body image is the number one concern. That was always high for girls. It didn't used to be the number one concern for boys, but it is now. So we can see, they're saturated with this imagery of the perfect body, for instance, and they just can't measure up to that. So there's a lot of sort of stress and anxiety about that. And also other issues, children can't keep their attention for as long. They can't read a full article or a full book or even a full chapter, right? Their pro-social skills have really suffered. We see that a lot now with young people coming into the workforce, just not knowing how to interact with other people, expecting an authority figure to intervene all the time. So meditation, in particular, what I was interested in was the meditation that I practice and my parents practice, which was Sahaja Yoga meditation, because the objective is very clear, and the research that we do have has shown that it has something called a specific effect. And to explain that, we have to talk a little bit about meditation research, and I'll try to keep it as simple as I can. But one of the issues with meditation research is trying to prove whether meditation is any better than relaxation. Okay, so when you go for a swim or a jog or walk in the nature, you become relaxed. Your heart rate reduces, your blood pressure reduces, your blood vessels dilate, and it's called the relaxation response. So we can elicit that response in many ways. But does meditation offer something that's unique? Is a benefit above and beyond pure relaxation? Okay, because if there isn't, then there's some people should just walk a dog or walk in nature, which is also great and recommended. There is a thing called nature therapy, or should we be looking at potentially benefits of meditation? And the most ancient definitions of meditation are the definitions of thoughtless awareness. So this idea that there's a little space between our thoughts, and if we can expand on that space, if we can have complete mental silence, there's something extremely therapeutic that occurs. It could be rewiring of the brain. It could be complete relaxation of your central nervous system. Whatever it is, there's something going on that's helpful. And to determine that, we need to do meditation studies where we take the meditation we want to look at or experiment with or examine, and another group that is almost exactly the same minus what we would consider the active ingredient. Okay, so we've done, for example, a Sahaja Yoga study where the one group did Sahaja Yoga and another group did like a relaxation and they had massage, right? So everything to elicit the relaxation response, but they didn't get this experience of thoughtless awareness. And we saw statistical differences. So there was definitely a big difference between those groups. And Sadhyoga, the benefits of Sadhyoga or thoughtless awareness were above and beyond the relaxation response. So I was interested in looking at if we could examine this kind of meditation in primary school children, because it hadn't been done before. So that's what my research was about, and we found, a lot of benefit there. I was looking at things like prosocial skills, emotional symptoms, conduct problems, hyperactivity and inattention, and peer relationship problems. And we found overall a 75% reduction in those issues after the trial. So it definitely can work, and we should be using it in schools. But we do need evidence-based, interventions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And the more we go in depth, the more sense it starts to make. So now, Kabir, self-regulation, or the ability to understand and manage our behavior and our reactions to circumstances, to people around us, is something that is best to learn as early in life as possible. And like you said, some of us do not even have those skills as adults. And when we don't have those skills, we have such a hard time regulating reactions or emotions, like frustration or even excitement for that matter.
Yeah.
And I did see that you've also mentioned the emotional regulation aspect in your studies. So could you speak to the importance or the need for having these skills in the modern day?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, how I mentioned earlier, we live in a culture that is, I would say, counterproductive in many ways. So, we have high levels of stress and anxiety from many different avenues. So if we can't learn those skills early and master them, then we're going to have issues right up into adulthood. So that sort of regulation, meditation is really beneficial for regulation, because if you look at Sadhyoga, what is the overarching philosophy is that you have to remain in balance, right? And so it's being able to observe yourself when you're getting carried away, and return to a position of balance, of equilibrium. But that's a practice. It's a practice that you develop over many years, right? But it's a skill we've generally lost, because as a society we're less introspective. We're extremely reactive. You can see that on social media, and the people who are the most reactive and the most loud and the most offended get the most attention. So the incentives are all wrong. That we're not looking to the people who are level-headed, and the people who are able to remain sort of impartial, and that sort of quality which used to be valued isn't valued so much anymore. But what we see is for your overall mental health, and even just for if you're looking at practically, if you want to do well in your career, okay, if you want to be able to study well, if you want to have long-lasting and meaningful relationships, you need that. And like I said, that's something I noticed about myself when I stopped meditating. I wasn't able to self-regulate in the same way. And so when you're able to reset that way, I notice I become much less reactive. I'm able to witness what's happening, but not be sort of emotionally agitated by it in the same way. Doesn't mean that you become robots, but you just have a sense of proportion and balance, in day-to-day life. And unfortunately, as I said, the culture at the moment is not very helpful for most of our young people. So we need to give them tools, and this is a tool that is really valuable. And I think that you can see that's acknowledged, because you can see, the explosion of things like mindfulness, right? So mindfulness is a sort of secular form of meditation. Its objective is fairly nebulous, which is part of the issue when researching it, because we don't really know what's the definition of mindfulness, because it's so broad and all encompassing. But largely or broadly, it's really about developing the state of witness. Okay, so just being able to witness your emotions and your mental chatter and so forth, which is a useful skill. Sahaja Yoga tries to take it a little bit further. It's saying, yeah, that's useful. That's like taking the first step up to the door, but opening the door and going through it is thoughtless awareness, is that state of thoughtless awareness. But that's quite a difficult concept, especially for the people in the West, because we're so wedded to our mental activity. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." So it's very hard for us to believe that I can be anything without my thought, my mental chatter, to detach from it. But I guess the point I'm making is that, you know, we've left organized religion, but we've still got a big void, a big spiritual void, and so you see the secular forms of meditation becoming very popular, and mindfulness is an example of that. So we know that, and that we're desperate for something, okay, to fill that void, that sort of spiritual void that we have. We know that we need something. We need a greater sense of meaning. We need something to bring balance in our lives. We're not sure what it is. So there is this, you know, in the culture, this we're looking for mindfulness. But my concern is that if things like that become just a way of continuing our culture without making any real change, which is what you see a lot now. You know, big corporations are saying, "Oh, look, you know, here, have this mindfulness class, but nevertheless, we'll still overwork you, and the culture in the workplace is still terrible. But here's the fig leaf of, you know, 1 or 2 mindfulness classes. It's not going to cut it." But the positive thing is that we do have this cultural awareness, where there's a moment now where they're like, okay, we can see we're at a crisis point. What are we going to do? And we need something. So forms of meditation, especially ancient forms of meditation like Sahaja Yoga, are really, really important. And I think will be an essential tool in the future.
I'm so glad that we are talking about this, because sometimes, you know, mindfulness or meditation is just a cool or trendy thing to do. And we use the terms like peace and calm, but we need to realize why we need to be able to self-regulate. And like you said, we have examples all around us that we can relate to. And if children can learn to center themselves, you know, it not only helps them in their learning, they also learn to behave in socially acceptable ways, and they learn to behave in newer situations with lesser guidance from adults. And, you know, that's how we create more healthy, independent individuals. And isn't that something we all want for our children? But I guess the question then that we come to is that how much time do kids need to spend to make this vision a reality?
Well, you know, Shrimataji, the founder of Sahaja Yoga, recommended meditating twice a day. And it's not an exact formula, because it really depends what you need. I meditate for probably about 20 minutes, 25 minutes in the morning, sometimes 30 minutes, and about 30 to 45 minutes in the evening. Yeah. And sometimes it's less and sometimes it's more. But it's really about trying to achieve the state. Okay, so it's not about mechanically performing the functions, sitting cross-legged, or and closing your eyes and focusing on your breathing. That's they're all methods of getting to the point. But the target experience is have I slowed down my mental chatter? Have I slowed down my thoughts? Have I experienced some mental silence? And when I've experienced that, then I've achieved it. If it happens in 5 minutes, then I've achieved it, right? And when you do get it, you enjoy it so much you sit there in that silence. So that's a kind of curly answer. But I think it's good to start the day with it and to end the day with it. Okay, start the day with it means that then you're feeling sort of centered when you commence your day, and then at the end of the day, we're obviously carrying all that stress or just tiredness from the day, and then I'll do something else, which is another meditation, but we'll do other techniques which they teach you in Sahaja Yoga, like foot soaking, which I find really useful to get rid of the heat in my body and really relax me. So yeah, twice a day is best. I found that, and that's what most Sahaj practitioners will do and will recommend. Just that's where you get the best results. But just remembering that trying to get the target experience, not beating yourself up if you don't. There's lots of days where you don't. But for me, at least as a minimum, if I can reduce my mental chatter and be able to become a better witness of my mental content, then I've achieved something. And it's a bit like riding a wave. As you get better at it, you're able to do it for longer. But the discipline needs to be there, and then it will come. It's just like writing. I think Stephen King said, "Inspiration is for amateurs." So he sits down every day to write. Sometimes he's inspired and writes a lot. Sometimes it's a dud day. It's quite similar with meditation. But you have to have the discipline first, and then you'll get more of these experiences.
That's great. And Kabir, before we let you go, I have one more question. And you mentioned that you have 3 kids under 7. So have you started introducing meditation to them or them to meditation?
Yeah, absolutely. We do regularly. Some days we're too exhausted to do it in the afternoon, to be honest. But, I notice we do meditation with them before bed, and that really helps. They sleep better. They don't have nightmares. And I've got 3 boys as well, so they're extremely active. So sometimes the best way to get them to slow down a little bit is to meditate. Yeah. So we meditate with them regularly, and they enjoy it. And it's nice because what I've noticed is often they become quite philosophical or introspective. Because we don't realize how busy we are. We often don't get the time to sit down with our kids, in silence, or we think we have to fill the gaps with doing stuff all the time, or we better occupy them. And so I've noticed, especially in the evenings when we meditate, normally, after that, they like to talk about things, but not just superfluous things. Usually they're quite deep and philosophical things, which is really nice. You don't get that opportunity much. So they'll ask about the big questions. I don't always have the answers. I fluff them a little bit, but and that's interesting because I realize we need to give our kids the opportunity to have those sort of big questions and to be a bit philosophical and ask these sort of deep and meaningful questions. And I found just that they tend to do that after meditation, which is really nice. Yeah.
Well, yeah, all it takes is, just 10 minutes. And I would say more importantly, the discipline to create those 10 minutes. And I think that is one sound investment we need to make in our future generation. And history will judge us by the difference we make in the lives of our children, said Nelson Mandela. Well, thank you, Kabir. It was a really insightful discussion. And I really enjoyed talking to you. And I'm really glad you made some great points. And I do want to thank you for your time. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.